This bill says understanding the treaty requires so much more than simply understanding the language it uses.
Why would TVNZ be telling us we can't understand the treaty? The answers shocked me. I now know why the media, government and Māori leaders aren't telling us the whole story. However, before I can tell you, we need to understand what Te Riti o Waitangi actually is. Firstly, don't worry, it's safe. It can't be changed. When people say it's being stolen, they are lying and trying to get you angry. So the treaty has two versions, the English and the Māori version, which was translated into Māori by missionary Henry Williams and his son Edward, who were both Māori language experts. The treaty is actually really easy to understand because Queen Victoria wanted it that way. That's also why she wanted it translated into Māori, so the chiefs knew exactly what they were getting into. The majority of chiefs didn't need to read or write, so the debates that followed the reading of the treaty are what they would use to make up their minds whether to sign or not. Now let's go through the treaty ourselves, because there's no better way to learn than for you to actually look at it and make up your own mind. You'll see that I've got three versions here. I've got the English version in the middle, the Māori version on the left, and the back translation of the Māori version on the right that was done in 1869 by the government. So let's start off with the preamble on the English version, which says, Her Majesty Victoria, Queen of England, in her gracious consideration for the chiefs and people of New Zealand, and her desire to preserve to them their land and to maintain peace and order amongst them, has been pleased to appoint an officer to treat with them for the cession of the sovereignty of their country and of the islands adjacent to the Queen, seeing that many of Her Majesty's subjects have already settled in the country and are constantly arriving, and that it is desirable for their protection, as well as the protection of the natives, to establish a government amongst them. Her Majesty has accordingly been pleased to appoint me, William Hobson, a captain in the Royal Navy, to be governor of such parts of New Zealand as they may now or hereafter be ceded to Her Majesty, and proposes to the chiefs of the Confederation of the United Tribes of New Zealand and the other chiefs to agree to the following articles. The preamble says the treaty is between Queen Victoria, the chiefs, and the residents of New Zealand. The chiefs will cede sovereignty, and once they do that, a new government will be formed with Hobson as the governor. Now let's get into the first article. The chiefs of the Confederation of the United Tribes and the other chiefs who have not joined the Confederation cede to the Queen of England forever the entire sovereignty of their country. Now this is big because lots of people argue against it. Now let's have a look at the translation and see what it says. The chiefs of the Assembly and all the chiefs also who have not joined the Assembly give up entirely to the Queen of England forever all the government of their lands. So it says the same thing. Now let's go on to the second article. The Queen of England confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and tribes and to all people of New Zealand the possession of their lands, dwellings and all their property. But the chiefs of the Confederation and the other chiefs grant to the Queen the exclusive right of purchasing such land, and the proprietors thereof may be disposed to sell at such prices as shall be agreed upon between them and the persons appointed by the Queen to purchase from them. Then we go to Article 3. In return for cession of the sovereignty to the Queen, the people of New Zealand shall be protected by the Queen of England, and the rights and privileges of British subjects will be granted to them. And then we look at the conclusion. So it's signed by William Hobson, and it says, Now we, the chiefs of the Confederation of the United Tribes of New Zealand, being assembled at Waitangi, and we, the other chiefs of New Zealand, having understood the meaning of these articles, accept of them and agree to them all, in witness whereof our names or marks are affixed. So let me just summarize the treaty in my own words. The preamble says the treaty is between Queen Victoria, the chiefs and the residents of New Zealand. The chiefs will cede sovereignty, and once they do that, a new government will be formed with Hobson as the governor. The first article says the chiefs cede sovereignty of their country to the Queen of England forever. The second article says the Queen guarantees chiefs and residents their possessions and property, but the chiefs grant the Queen the exclusive right of purchasing said property. And the third article says, in return for ceding sovereignty, everyone becomes British subjects. As you can see, the treaty is simple and easy to understand. So what has caused all the recent confusion, and what shocked me? The confusion began when the Labour government created the 1975 Treaty of Waitangi Act. What the government and Māori leaders don't want you to know is the Treaty of Waitangi Act used a false English version of the treaty instead of the real Māori Tiriti o Waitangi, and they did this on purpose to claim more rights for Māori. The false treaty, also called the so-called certified copy or the grievance industry treaty copy, was written by Captain Hobson's secretary, James Freeman. It's unknown why he wrote his own copy instead of getting a copy of the final draft from Hobson, but his version was not correct. It is not a copy of the final English Treaty of Waitangi or the Māori Tiriti o Waitangi. Over the last 40 years, the false treaty lies have been amplified by the Waitangi Tribunal, such as, in 1986, they included the new undefined principles into legislation, which have been used to replace the actual meaning in the articles of the treaty. If you want to say the treaty has been stolen, this is when it was first stolen. In 1987, the Court of Appeal referred to the treaty relationship as akin to a partnership. It wasn't. Chiefs 100% ceded sovereignty. Now let's have a look at some more recent examples.
Article 2 of the treaty promised tino rangatiratanga to all, everybody, is actually, it's a nonsense because it was a treaty between two sovereign nations.
It wasn't a treaty between two sovereign nations. New Zealand wasn't sovereign, and as also stated in the treaty, it was between Her Majesty Victoria, Queen of England, and her gracious consideration of the chiefs and people of New Zealand. The treaty was between three peoples.
Is it not the true purpose of this treaty to allow the rule of law? To protect the natives from the settlers and the settlers from their own lawlessness and depravity?
Yes, of course. It is an outcome we all desire.
Can we focus on that?
Did they honestly believe that the government of our great empire would go to such lengths to protect a few savages, drunks and whoremongers from themselves?
TVNZ's Treaty of Waitangi, What Really Happened, screened on Waitangi Day 2011. It insults the honourable intentions of Queen Victoria and fails to mention that 4,000 Māori were dying from disease each year, the French were coming, and Māori were likely to start warring again, but with a lot more muskets. They needed British law. They needed this treaty. The Treaty of Waitangi comic, for high school students since 2018, references the false treaty, which says that Māori have possession of land, forests and fishing, which isn't in the real treaty. If the real treaty articles are put into law, they will supersede the false treaty principles that have been created by the Waitangi Tribunal. If that happens, everyone will have to be treated equally under law, which was the intention of Tiriti o Waitangi in the first place. Those who have been benefiting from this injustice, who are sometimes referred to as elite Māori, the treatyists, Māori corporations, and tribalists like Te Pāti Māori, will lose their ability to make claims without evidence. Māori can still make claims, but they have to be valid under New Zealand law like everybody else.